Hello, Vivek. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Colleen?
Good. Great to see you. Nice to be here.
Likewise.
Happy Data Privacy Week.
Yes, happy Data Privacy Week indeed.
It's a pretty cloudy day here in San Francisco, so hopefully let's bring some sun, right? To some joy to this Wednesday, I would say.
I don't know about that. It's been raining incessantly for the last, I don't know, week, maybe 2 weeks or so.
Oh my
I
gosh.
can't, I was in DC last week, and it was snowing over there. I came here, it's raining. I don't know which one I prefer.
I
Uh,
gotta say I'm disappointed being in Chicago. I came here for the weather. I'm
yeah,
like, oh man. But anyways, so we're here, Data Privacy Week. For those hopping on, welcome. Thanks for spending a little time with Catch. Every day this week, we're hosting a little 30-minute LinkedIn Live session with an expert in the data privacy industry. And today, I'm lucky enough to be chatting with Vivek on the topic of AI and building an enterprise privacy layer for AI. Vivek, can I ask you to give an intro, a little background for the viewers here?
absolutely. So, hello everyone. My name is Vivek Vaidya. I'm one of the founders and the CTO of Catch. Prior to Catch, I was the CTO of Salesforce Marketing Cloud, where I ran all of the engineering for the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And I came to Salesforce through the acquisition of a company called Crux, where I was also co-founder and CTO. And as luck would have it, we got acquired in late 2016. And my first big project after I took the reins over as CTO of Marketing Cloud was GDPR compliance across all of Salesforce Marketing Cloud products, which was a fun exercise in and of itself because there were three different big products with three different engineering cultures, three different tech stacks. So I've had some scar tissue with GDPR compliance, and frankly, that's why we started Catch, is to make lives for people like me easier down the road. And prior to Crux Salesforce, Colleen, I was another startup called Wrapped, which got acquired by Microsoft. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I love building companies. All the companies I've built have been at the intersection of data, AI, ML, etc. All of them enterprise software. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you about enterprise, the privacy layer for enterprise right now.
Fantastic. Great. Yeah, I was joking with my fellow host this week that I had an unfair advantage with registrations because you just add AI to the topic and it seems like it's still, over a year into this gold rush, if you will, and it still just draws the eye for sure.
Yeah, yeah, indeed,
Amazing.
indeed. And I think it's there is a lot of excitement. There's a lot of hype as well. But as we kind of parse out all of that, one thing that is, I think, consistent, that is coming out in all of these conversations about AI is the need for governance, the need for privacy, because the AI models and the AI solutions that people are building right now are so much more advanced, even compared to 3 years ago. And when I say solutions, I mean stuff that is available to the public, like not in research labs and stuff. And the implications for citizens, the implications for people and how their data is used, creators, etc. It's quite vast. It's exciting, but important for us to talk about these things in with the right context and taking all of these considerations into account.
Yeah. So Vivek, you have an opportunity to speak with a lot of privacy professionals, right? Catch
Uh-huh.
customers, business leaders, events like we were at the IAPP AI Governance Global Conference in Boston in November. What are you noticing about the way privacy professionals are thinking about AI, the questions they're asking, grappling with?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think so November 30th, 2022, when OpenAI released ChatGPT, right? After that, there has been this shift in focus, right? Everybody now, and it's a good thing, I think, because people now just take things like consent management and DSAR fulfillment, etc., for somewhat for granted. That, oh yeah, of course we're going to be doing that. But now the conversation has shifted to, well, what about AI? And AI, not just in the sense of what models we might be building in-house. That is very important. But more importantly, because of ChatGPT, employees at companies are now able to use AI in a way that is perhaps not completely in control of the privacy legal professionals who have the responsibility to govern and understand risk for the business when it comes to AI. So uh, a lot of conversations about that range from, well, what does AI governance mean, to how do you help companies think about this, or we're doing these things, where are we on that journey, what more can we do, how can we improve? So a broad spectrum of conversations, Colleen, but the steel thread that runs through all of them is this notion of AI governance that everybody is starting to now try to figure out. I sometimes, I draw the analogy with that parable of the seven blind men and the elephant, right? Where everybody's trying to figure out what this is, and somebody thinks it's X, somebody thinks it's Y. So that's where we are, I think, in the whole AI governance journey. But at least we're having lots and lots of conversations, good
Mm-hmm.
conversations, in fact.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen a noticeable change? Like you said, it's since November, over a year ago that ChatGPT came out. Have you seen a noticeable change in sort of the maturity level of these conversations, or is it still just all in its infancy when it comes to thinking about AI governance?
No, I think it's a spectrum, right? And it really depends on the maturity of the organization. I recently had a conversation with a few folks who work at a large telecom company, and they're like, yeah, our data scientists use all of these tools, and they have a record of all the models that they've trained, but I don't have, and this was a legal professional, I don't have any access to them, right? So two things for me from my perspective. One, they realize that they need access to that information in some way, shape, or form. And the more important thing from my perspective is that they're having the dialogue with their counterparts in data science, which is very important. So so yes, so those are what I would call more advanced conversations. And then there are people who are like, well, what does AI governance mean? How should I think about it? What kind of programs do I need to put in place? Where do I start? That's another very common question that people ask. Where is just where do I start?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, in the spirit of that, kind of practical advice for getting started, I'd love to use this conversation to talk through some key pillars of focus for many
Yeah.
privacy programs. And let's kind of explore how each domain changes with the introduction of considering AI models. I think it makes a lot of sense to start with consent, right?
Yep.
Still a huge priority, maybe the top priority for many folks, just figuring out that user experience, comprehensive consent, making sure transparency and control shine through for the user. So let's talk about kind of before and after with creating a consent experience, sort of pre-AI world. What does CMP look like in a traditional data environment? And then how does that have to change for considering AI models?
Yeah, I think so. There's two parts to consent, right? One is capturing consent, right? And then the second part is actually making it so, or making sure that you are respecting the choices that are made by your end users vis-a-vis their choices around how their data can or cannot be used for various things, right? So on the consent capture side, uh, the changes are not that big, because what you have to do is you have to think about now, okay, uh, what are the different ways in which I want to, or my company, my enterprise, my organization wants to use user data for building AI models? Which one of those AI models actually leverage personal data, right? That's so you need to go through that exercise, and that's a conversation that you have with your data scientists and whatnot. The one important thing to consider over there is sometimes you may not think that you're using personal data directly, but indirectly you may be. A good example of this is uh, in in or sensitive data, like personal sensitive data. A good example of this is race, right? And even if you don't have race as an explicit variable in your model, if you're using zip code, right, that is a predictor. You can use census data and people do this. You can use census data to figure out what is the likely distribution of race in this zip code, and then that ends up implicitly affecting the model. So on the consent capture side, you have to think about how all of these things are going to impact your disclosures to your end users in the category of AI, or what's called automated decision making, ADM. But the more interesting thing is around how you process that consent. So say, and I'll give you a personal example. I mentioned Crux earlier, right? We used to build lookalike models at Crux, and we used to use user data in those lookalike models. Uh, now, now, uh, After we went through the whole GDPR compliance process, our customers, we were a processor, our customers, the controllers, would give us consent information collected from their end users. And sometimes we would get signals like, well, this user ID has opted out of lookalike modeling, because an automated decision making AI model that the customer is using through Crux. So the question becomes now, well, this person is this user is opting out. What do we do, right? Do we retrain the model? Uh, so that is an input consideration, right? That, oh, we cannot use this user's data for training. And then the output consideration is the user also, when they're seeing ads from whatever, say Kellogg's, L'Oreal, AB InBev, whatever, a large number of customers we had, the users need to be confident that that is not the output of an AI model, right? So both on the input side and on the output side, you have to take that into account. So we used to retrain our models weekly, these consent signals would be fed into the data pipeline that prepared the training data for these lookalike models, and we would exclude all of the users who had not consented to lookalike modeling. So that's an example of things that you could or should do. Now, every business is different. You may not be able to retrain your models weekly for various reasons. But the important thing over there is to have the conversation between the data scientist, the business, and the privacy organization to make sure that you're all aligned on what your approach is going to be vis-a-vis processing consent when it comes to AI models. Because more often than not, it will require you to have a position on whether you retrain your models or not.
Hmm. And it's too early to say best practice for how often that should happen, or entirely depends on the business.
It does depend on the business, right? And it's also it also depends on how much risk you're willing to accept as a business, what kind of models you're training, what data is going into those models. So it's not a here's fill out this spreadsheet, come up with these scores, and if the score is less than 0.5, you have to retrain. Otherwise, you don't have to retrain. It's not formulaic like that, at least not yet.
Yeah, I see. Makes a lot of sense. Okay. Let's move over to another key priority, which is DSAR fulfillment, right? Top of mind for a lot of folks, especially in light of recent regulations. We have the California Delete Act. There's a lot of companies out there, not just data brokers, who are potentially going to have a big influx of these consumer requests just due to the new rights afforded. So, same kind of thing. Let's talk about before and after, what it looks like for fulfilling these in a traditional database environment, and then how that changes for AI models.
Yeah, I mean, the treatment for DSARs is similar, right? In that ultimately it comes down to in the pre-AI world where you were not, there was no machine learning or Gen AI or predictive modeling going on. The Relatively speaking, the DSAR fulfillment process was somewhat straightforward. Vivek at catch.com has requested to delete their data. Well, there's a database somewhere that contains data, multiple tables with data about Vivek at catch.com. Well, just go and delete it from there, right? But now there is a model in today's world, there is a model that has been trained with Vivek's data. Well, was the data anonymized before was fed into the model? Was it fed? Was sensitive data going into the model? So you have to take all these things into consideration, and then again define for your business, what does delete mean? It on the one hand, it could simply mean, hey, we are going to make sure that if depending on the model, of course, if we have an output for Vivek that the model produced, that output row is deleted. You could take that point of view. Or you could say, you know what, we are not going to use Vivek's data, Vivek at catch.com, that user's data, in our model training, right? And typically all these regulations have a window where you're supposed to delete data within 30, 45, 90, whatever that time period is, right? So that kind of gives you a sense for, okay, within 60 days, 45 days, whatever that time window is, I should delete Vivek's data from the data that is being fed to train my models and then retrain them, right? So similar treatment to consent. And the reason for that is when it comes to AI, really you're talking about training and then so input and then output, and the treatment is similar for consent and for resource. Conceptually, implementation might be different or more challenging depending on what systems you use, etc. But conceptually, it's about, should you retrain your models and remove the data from those users who asked their data to be deleted or not consented before you retrain, or should you just delete it from the output? Those are the two major considerations in
Yeah.
this category.
We have a comment in the chat here from Craig saying DSAR tools show no signs of any type of intelligence, which is why we need AI, but not trained on DSAR tools.
Yeah, I think, look, again, it depends on what functionality you want to access, what functionality you're expecting from your DSAR tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I think there is a lot of innovation that is going to come down the road where tooling will be available to inspect AI models, and this goes into, we're going to talk about risk assessment and stuff, where tooling will be available to assess, hey, does this model have sensitive data? How does it use sensitive data? Should I be worried about it, right? What kind of risk exists over there, right? The state of the art, if you will, right now for DSAR tools is, when it comes to AI, right? DSAR tools are able to inspect data and ascertain whether these data sets contain PII or not, right? And if these data sets contain PII, then they should be included in the DSAR fulfillment process. So those tools are available. That kind of technology is available, and as an aid for privacy and data professionals to say, okay, you should be looking at these 15 systems because they contain PII, and that assessment or that judgment has been made by a DSAR tool, right? So that is available. The jury's still out, and frankly, people are even doing some research on what does it mean for AI and AI models to be considered in this whole DSAR fulfillment process right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot to see about. Well, let's move to risk assessment since you mentioned it. Another high priority area. We've seen things like models inadvertently discriminating against individuals, been a priority for the FTC. So I think this area in particular is really interesting. What are we trying to do with AI risk assessments, and how could we practically evaluate whether the model introduces risk to the business?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, look, there are certain industries, and financial services comes to top of mind for this, where they pay a lot of attention to this topic of bias and fairness, right? So we can learn from them actually, and one of you mentioned like what kind of conversations I've been having with professionals. One thing that's become very interesting to me from these conversations is people are now focusing on how to evaluate their models, because privacy professionals are not data scientists. Data scientists will come, oh yeah, we use these measures and these metrics and look at these charts and whatnot, and therefore we conclude that the model performs well or it does not have bias, this, that, the other. That's great, right? But you have to be able to explain those things using terms and concepts that a non-technical, non-data science person will understand. Auditors need to be able to understand this. Regulators need to be able to understand this. Privacy professionals need to be able to understand this. So there's a lot of dialogue right now around how do we evaluate models beyond the training and testing that data scientists do to build these models. So typically, what happens is you have a data set, and you train. The process of training involves splitting that data set into a train set and a test set, and then you train your model on the train set, and then you evaluate your model on the test set. So you say, okay, in the training set, so let's say you're building a classifier that takes a piece of text and classifies it as good or bad, or positive or negative, so sentiment analysis. So you would split your input into train and test, and now you would train your model on the train set, and then say, okay, now the model didn't see the test set. I'm going to now run the model on the various records in the test set and compare what the model produced as output, so positive or negative, to what the test set contained as positive or negative, and then see where the disagreement occurs and agreement occurs, etc., right? So data scientists do that, and they produce a lot of information through that process. But what I think we need to do is we need to extend that. We need to extend that to say, okay, what are other data sets that can be used to evaluate this model, and can we create these data sets from the real world and not show them to the model at all, right? And then uh, do two things. One, show, hey, here's why we picked these data sets. This data set, for example, this data set is intentionally biased towards these kinds of attributes. And this data set is biased towards these other kinds of attributes. And now we're going to run the model against these data sets. And I'll show you that, oh, look, the model produces output that is leaning more towards this set of data versus this set of data. Are we sure we want to release this? Right? And that is an assessment that the business can make. The data scientist, the business person, and the privacy professional, they can get together, look at all of this, right? And then make the call. So independent evaluation of models through techniques like using synthetic data or perturbation of input data once you understand schemas, etc. That those are things that we're going to see coming out in the not so distant future, in the category of AI governance. And that, Colleen, to your point about risk assessment, it's all about that is the output or input into the risk assessment, beyond just like getting input from the business. Oh, why are you building this model? Oh, this model solves this problem, etc. How did you train this model? Oh, we use this data set to train the model, etc. Now the question will be, how did you evaluate the model? How did you evaluate risk for the model? What kind of metrics did you use to evaluate that risk? Right?
Yeah.
So these kinds of questions will become more prominent in the risk assessment, and data scientists will have to build tooling. Companies like Ketch will have to build tooling, because this is part of the overall privacy layer that we want to provide. So that's where I think all this is going when it comes to risk assessment.
And when you start to get into the results or proof points of, we ran it against this data set, got X result, this result, that sounds like getting into the proof points to show that the company did their best, right?
Correct.
That they didn't discriminate against certain individuals or groups. That's sort of the proof. Yeah.
Correct. And there's something that you can even do before that, right? So I remember I mentioned the training process where you have the data set for training and whatnot, right? You can actually do a lot of analysis on the training data itself to figure out whether there is bias inherent in the training data without building the model. So there's a lot of work that you can do before you build or train a model to understand whether there is there is bias in your data set, or your data set is not fair, etc., etc. And then once you understand that, you can use various techniques, like I mentioned, synthetic data generation. You can see whether techniques like that will help you counter that bias in your training data, even before you build your model, because model training is expensive. And now and now with this whole you know movement around Gen AI, right? People are going to be building. People are going to be building models themselves. They're going to be fine tuning these large language models, or these generative AI models for image generation, audio generation, etc., with their proprietary data. And so understanding all of that, those aspects of bias, fairness, etc., before you send that to a generative AI model to be fine tuned becomes even more important, right? So and then if you do end up fine tuning this model, that is not in your control. And that's
Right.
happening by OpenAI or Anthropic. Or now, of course, you can use an open source model like Llama and do it yourself too, but you don't have access to Llama. They've made the parameters open source and whatnot, but the code, you can't go around futz with the code, uh, or most people can't or won't. So recognizing these things and coming up with independent ways to evaluate the model post building and pre building become even more important in this new world of Gen AI from a
Absolutely.
risk perspective.
Absolutely. Well, we have a few minutes left. One final topic I'd like to touch base on, as far as privacy program pillars, would be explainability. Right?
Yeah.
We've seen this in the regulations. It's in GDPR. What's your opinion on this requirement when it comes to AI models? Is it well posed? Why or why not? How do you think about it?
Yeah, look, I think that it's explainability is an interesting topic, right? Because nobody actually knows how these deep learning networks work, right? And so to ask somebody, say, explain how you got that output, like, I don't know, man. The neural net did something, and the output was produced. Whereas classical ML, like if you're using regression based models for classification or whatever, you can actually use techniques like Lime and Shapley values to analyze or explain why did the model produce this prediction for this input, right? What features were considered, etc. Now that information is still geeky, like it is still in data sciencey terms, right? So you have to make it accessible to folks who don't understand. Oh, what feature we did this feature engineering and whatnot. Feature number 134. Okay, what is feature number 134? Nobody knows, right? Except the data scientist, of course. So that's so I think explainability is very important, but we need to, my opinion is that explainability needs you need to think about explainability not in the technical sense that people have been thinking about it. That's important, we should continue doing that, but also in a practical sense. What does explainability mean? Like, just go back to first principles. We are trying to understand how models will perform under various situations, under various types of input given to the model. What is the model going to output? And that comes back to my evaluation point that I brought about mentioned earlier. So I think that a practical solution for explainability will involve a combination of techniques that are available out there right now, that are grounded in rigor and theory and in mathematics, and combined with practical approaches like evaluation of models using independent data sets and whatnot. And then together, uh, I think there will be a practical solution for explainability.
I love it. And I love how many of these kind of conversations always just come back to thinking about it practically and
Yes.
from a first principle standpoint. It really helps. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like I always like to say, what problem are you trying to solve, right? And the problem we're trying to solve over here is get everybody, all the stakeholders, including consumers, more comfortable, build trust by being more transparent with how their data is used for AI, right?
Mhm.
And the more practical and accessible we can make that, the better.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Vivek. We're about at time, so I want to wrap up. Before we do, I have one final question for you. It's the start of the new year. We're seeing a
Yeah.
lot of folks changing jobs and some new people in roles of chief privacy officers and privacy program managers. As a technologist, from your perspective, what would be your kind of first 100 days advice for anyone starting a new role as a privacy leader?
Yeah, look, I'm a big believer, as I mentioned already, right? I mentioned multiple times that business, technology, privacy need to come together. So my advice would be, in your first 100 days, learn as much about the business and learn build relationships with as many of your stakeholders and constituents as you can, because this is not a problem that one person can solve or one group can solve. This is not a problem that can be solved if there is tension and not alignment and mutual understanding of goals and outcomes that you want to achieve. It helped us tremendously at Crux and Salesforce when we were going through the process of GDPR compliance, and that's what I tell everybody. Go have a beer with your. My advice: first 100 days, it's 3 months or so. Once a month, go have a beer with your counterparts and learn what their challenges are and build alignment with them.
I love it. Great advice and a perfect note to end on. Well, thanks so much, Vivek, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thanks, live viewers, for listening. And if you like the session, would encourage you to pop over to the Catch LinkedIn page. We've got a bunch of other LinkedIn live sessions and a couple more coming up this week for Data Privacy Week. So that's a wrap. Thanks, Vivek.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Colleen.
Bye.
Bye.